In the distant future, vampires rule the night, but their numbers are dwindling. One podcast is unlike all the others. Half human, half vampire. This is Lefty Speaks, the official podcast for Vampire Hunter D.
Hello, hunters, and welcome back to Lefty Speaks, the official Vampire Hunter D podcast. I am Scott McLean, and with me here again are my co-hosts, Brandon Easton and Neal Fischer. Today, we are going to be talking about a question that we were asked on our Discord. So asking us questions on our Discord can, in fact, get you an answer. We were asked about what goes into getting a story from story to a finished film or television series. Like what is that whole journey? And so for this recording, I have worn a shirt to illustrate the fact that it's complicated. The airspeed of a fully laden swallow. And before anyone asks if it's African or European, the shirt says right here in the corner, there are 47 different kinds of sparrows in Africa alone and 74 different species of sparrows worldwide. So, it's complicated. Let's get into it. To start us off, I want to mention something that I've loved hearing at a couple of different conventions. There was a panel that Brandon has moderated with a number of his other writer friends who have had some storied careers in Hollywood and talking about the changes in the landscape. For the last, let's call it Brandon, 10, 15 plus years, selling an original script has just been a non-starter.
Right.
Whereas in just, what was it, Neal, you were telling me in the last 2 weeks, we've seen some original scripts actually sell?
Yeah.
So we've come full circle again.
A huge spike just the last 2 weeks, and it's put everyone kind of in shock.
Yeah,
in a good way.
In a good way.
And Hollywood Reporter and Variety, I've seen the script sales. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
So over the last, let's call it 15 plus, almost 20 years, you couldn't sell an original script to save your life. So a lot of people wrote their screenplay, then a comic book or graphic novel, so that would go out first, and then they'd have the screenplay already ready to go, even though that's where they started, so they could say, hey, this is an adaptation from the graphic novel. Play the Hollywood game of whatever flavor is today, and looks like we're back to original scripts being okay. Maybe.
We're
see.
moving. We're moving in that direction. I wouldn't quite
give it another couple years.
Yeah. I wouldn't hold my breath, quite yet. Yeah, let the wind pick up the sails a little bit more before we get too excited, because it could just be a weird blip.
To realize a lot of these sales are not coming from complete unknowns.
Yes,
they're buying
correct.
stuff from people with a proven background,
Mm-hmm.
or, and this is the scarier thing, I didn't realize how much the metrics of your social media following is calculated or brought into the decision to buy your spec script, because people who have like 1 million TikTok followers will have a better chance of selling a spec than somebody who maybe worked on a couple of TV shows now. And that's kind of scary. This is something that everyone's been talking about. I mean, I'm in the Writers Guild, WGA. This is something that people have been talking about behind the scenes. And I feel that we really have to talk about the methods of procurement or optioning these days, because it's definitely changed. Like in old days, you might have to sneak onto a studio lot, like friends of mine have, slide a script under somebody's desk or under a door. Maybe that worked, maybe it didn't. I have friends who it actually did work for. But now, nobody wants to read anything. People want proof of concepts. People want pitch packages that already have actors and acclaimed writers connected. And that's fundamentally changed a lot. So while, yes, we can celebrate some spec or original script sales or options, we have to keep in mind very strongly that, it's still going to be a different kind of rat race.
Yeah.
And that rat race is connected to your connectivity in the social media world. and that's a thing that's really
Yeah.
problematic
Yeah.
in my mind. You know.
Yeah. You reminded me how I got Sushi Girl. We one of my partners in Sushi Girl, Dustin Pfaff, put the script. He shopped in the same grocery store as Tony Todd, and
Of course.
he threw the script in Tony's shopping cart. And yeah, that worked. It worked. Tony came on as executive producer and helped us get it made. But it does happen. It does work sometimes. Could also really offend someone. So
Yes. Yes. So you never know what, works for one might fail for another.
Yep.
And so that's, I think, part of this story is it may have worked for someone, but trying to replicate or carbon copy rarely leads to success. And I think that's part of Hollywood's problem, is that it'll bandwagon certain things and then just murder it. For example, if you think about the success we saw of some major book franchises, 10, 20 years ago, and how successful they were. And all of a sudden, everybody's wanting to make a book franchise adaptation. You had Harry Potter, Twilight, and then it
Percy
just went
Jackson.
crazy. Yeah.
Oh,
we were doing
Maze
Percy
Runner. I mean, you
Jackson.
just go down the list. It's crazy.
Yep. Maze Runner. We got to the Defiant series. We got to the Spiderwick Chronicles and
Mrs. Pettigrew or whatever that was called. Mrs. Pettigrew.
And so many of them failed. It's like, just because it was a successful book franchise doesn't mean there were a few successes. So everybody's like, this can't fail. Let's run with it. And just because one thing that was similar worked doesn't mean another that will work. And it might get you your thing made, but it may not run the course. It may not go well. You don't know how it's going to do. So we're going to do this because somebody else did it like this. And so we're just going to try and replicate it. It was, we're this, but different, maybe hopefully better. Questionable for success. So what we're going to talk about today is mainly going to focus on narrowing our scope so that we're not in every movie or show that's ever been made. We're going to focus on adapting from an existing work, because that's what we're doing for Vampire Hunter D. And we're also only going to talk about animation. We are not going to spend as much time talking about a live action adaptation, because there are enough differences between animation and live action adaptations that we could spend hours just discussing the differences.
Yes.
So we're going to focus here on those being our narrowing criteria, giving ourselves some boundaries. So first step, we've got a little outline here. We're just going to walk down. So your first step is you've got to procure what it is you're doing. And it could be something that was original and developed either as spec or in-house. That's a valid way to go. But for our purposes, we're going to focus on there's a book or a story, a video game that you want to adapt and turn into a film or a series. So you got to go option it. You hear a lot of people toss around terms: option, license, purchase, and they're often talking around the same idea, legally being able to adapt something. However, they all do mean different things. If you option something, that means that you've paid a bit of money and you typically have a time window in which to do something with it. I've optioned something so that I can do a development package to try and shop for a distribution deal or to get talent attached. If you've done a full license, you have done more than that. You can then actually do something with what you've licensed, not just optioned. So a lot of studios will option something if for no other reason to make sure nobody else can do anything with it, which is sadly more often the case than not. And then if you decide to go forward, you do a full license, and then that has a term and stipulations, and what those terms, what your stipulations are, that's unique to every relationship. You could have a agreement where you own that right into perpetuity, or you have to renew it every so often, or you have performance metrics. You have to show, hey, I'm making progress on this. See, here's our storyboards, from the script. Here's our distribution deal. There are some typical things you find in every contract. You're going to have a term. You're going to have a price that you've got to pay. But a lot of the other elements that make up, well, what is that term? What is that price? Do you have performance metrics? Do you have clauses that rescind the license or option? That's going to be unique to each one. So if you decide to go down this road, let's, be careful. You need a good entertainment lawyer. Don't freewheel it.
Yeah, I mean that's a big problem that a lot of people have is that they don't understand, and I think we've mentioned it in a couple other episodes where people making even a fan project, I mean there's certain, you cross certain lines, so making sure that you have the proper legal paperwork to protect you, protect the people you're working with, protect your investors. I mean, all of that, is important. And you can even, if you're getting the intellectual property rights from another entity, like a video game publisher or a comic book publisher, or originally from the creator, you also want to protect that bubble of you and the creator when you then take it to the next step and go for distribution, go to a studio, because they might want to screw everybody over. And so you need to have multiple layers of protection, legal protection. So do it right.
One thing people don't think about is that options do expire.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So there are companies that will pick up a property, and this is where the old school politics. This is the stuff I really have actually seen. I spent time at Disney/ABC back in 2015, and I've seen, and I'm not saying Disney did this, but I've seen companies go out, get something that's hot and original, not to make it, but so nobody else can make it.
Shelf it. Yep.
Shelf it. And when people complain about a lack of originality, what they don't know, there are literally vaults the size of apartment complexes filled with projects that would have probably been some of the biggest projects of all time that will never get made, simply so that no one else can make them.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I have seen all kinds of stuff come and go. I mean, there was I'm not going to say the name of the author, but there was a space opera series, actually a space colonization series, that got picked up that I thought was going to get made. And then when I found out, executive said to my face, he said, dude, we're not even going to, it costs too much, but we can't have Sony or Warner Brothers or NBC, or actually Universal back then, we can't have NBC Universal pick it up because they might make it and we could lose money. And when you see that kind of Game of Thrones-esque, no pun intended, but that Game of Thrones-esque type of play, that lets you know that there are a lot of politics behind even the procurement or the optioning of certain projects.
Yep.
So, and I think, I'm glad we're talking about this, because I feel that the average fan who does not get online and complain about stuff doesn't quite understand how this stuff actually works, versus the fan that gets online and complains about stuff who refuses to learn how any of this stuff works. So there we have it.
There's another layer to that too. The wonderful term of development costs. So another layer to this mess is, let's say you're a creator, and people ask the question, well, why doesn't the creator just get the rights back? Well, it's not just about getting the rights back, but the studio will often lodge costs against the IP so that in the future they can treat it like a lien against it. And well, if you want to get the option from us, if you want to get the rights to do this, that's great. You can, if you pay whatever we've docketed and billed against it. So if they have somehow spent $1 million in development costs, well, if you want that IP back, they want you to pay them $1 million. Good luck. Have fun.
That's why you got to have good attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because obviously, a lot of studios aren't willing to pay the the development fees. So there's, again, it's all what you put in your contracts initially to try to prevent that, and also for that material to come back to you. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if you are original creator or a publisher of a video game, you not only do you want that contract to have time limits on there, so that if it's not being used, it does come back, but that it doesn't come back with associated costs or
There's no bill attached.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you can write an agreement that is fair to a creator, that if you don't make use of your license, it reverts, and without onerous extra costs being added to it. And so I hope we're living up to the warning that this is a complicated topic, because we haven't even made it past the first point on our outline yet. We're still on point 1 here, folks. So, optioning for adaptation. It can be as complicated as the lawyers want to make it, and then they'll find some new ways to make it more complicated because somebody does something devious. I have seen incredibly predatory contracts, not just in the licensing part, but when they got to the actual development part for the movie. There was one, a friend of mine asked me to review for a movie that he had potentially was going to be a part of. And this contract stood out to me because of how they really worked to hide how they were going to screw everyone. It was a fairly lengthy contract for this production for the movie. We're talking like 25, 30-page contract. It doesn't need to be that long for a production contract. They had in 4 separate places different snippets that by themselves aren't a big deal, but all together, it allowed the manager of the production, i.e. the producer, to be able to take a loan against the film for more than the actual value of the cost of the movie at their sole discretion with no notice to anyone. So all the people who put the money into the film, they would get no say if this person signed the movie as collateral for a loan totaling equal to or greater than the investment and the cost for the production budget of the movie, using the movie as collateral. And remind you, this is split up into 4 different places in the contract. So that if this person wanted to go to their friend and say, get a loan against the movie, their friend would end up owning the movie when they, as producer, defaulted on it and bankrupted the movie. Their friend would gain ownership of it. The original investors would have no notice. And you've stolen the investor's money. You've stolen the movie with your friend, and you two get to keep the whole thing. To me, that is an example of a very sneaky predatory contract, but people do write things like that. So, but think about that in a licensing context. And you've got to keep this in mind, as Neal had mentioned, you've got to think layers of protection. There are people who will try to do those kind of things at every step in the process. So from the moment you start making that first option and license agreement, you've got to pay attention to, is this fair to everyone? Not just financially, but short-term legally, long-term legally. Are they fair expectations? And I've been told by more than one book publisher and video game publisher that at the time I talked to them and said, hey, I'd like to, license, this book franchise. And for that particular book franchise that I'm referring to, I can't talk about it because there will be more news in the future, maybe. I was the only person who ever approached them who'd read the whole franchise, who'd read the books. And evidently that's a very uncommon thing. And they kept talking to me, even though I was not representing the biggest offer they had received for this franchise, because I was the one who actually read it. And the author and I were talking at lunch, and they're like, oh, you've read it. So there are ways to gain more credibility. I remember hearing a story for the Game of Thrones show creators that they took Martin out to lunch and he started quizzing them about the books, and they had actually read the books. That's why they got the license. So your due diligence can actually come into play before you ever get to your contract on what you want to license for adaptation.
Yep. I mean, that's happening like right now with I also can't give out the name yet because right now lawyers are reviewing contracts and everything. But it looks very promising. So hopefully in the next future episodes, I might be able to finally reveal what it is. But yeah, the reason my team and I are even that far, when Sony and other, more established production companies had approached these video game creators, is because me and my team were very familiar with the video game and we know what we want to do with it. And so we were able to pitch an idea that totally fit the world setting and exactly what that team were like, well, we don't know how to do that, but that's what we would want to happen, And Sony and other production companies just wanted the title, just wanted the name that they could use to sell, and they hadn't even thought about what they really wanted to do with it. So that helps.
Yep. Oh, and important note on taking your agreements seriously in all regards. Neal and I have known each other. How long have we been friends? More than a decade at this point?
Well, way more. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
17 years or something. 15.
It's been a while.
Years, something like that. Yeah.
He has not told me what this IP is. He has honored his NDA, even though he knows I would keep my mouth shut. He's keeping his mouth shut because he signed a contract saying he would. So, contracts are important. If you honor them, especially to your friends and people you know, that is a very, very good thing. If you have the freedom to talk to people you trust, great. But if you ask your friend something, tell you, hey, I can't say it yet because contract, that to me is a wonderful thing, because
and
they've
even if
paid
you
attention
haven't,
to their job.
Yeah, even if you haven't signed an NDA, right? Because I technically haven't signed an NDA with this project, but my team trusts that I'm not going to share this information because we're small fries, right? And if if someone overhears this project, they might go, wow, we could go in and we could offer that company $10 million. And who knows, maybe that company when we first started talking to them almost a year ago about it, they weren't in financial, they weren't driven by money. But maybe right now they're having financial problems. And a big offer would make all the difference in the world. And if someone hears that this company is interested in making an animated series based on their video game, it could get snatched out. It could be gone. A year's worth of work for me and my team could be gone. So, yeah, just keep your mouth shut. I mean, I worked on Resident Evil and Silent Hill for 15 years, and people would dumpster dive to try and find, scripts or sides and stuff like that. And so you just learn, just don't say anything. Just keep vague, wait until it comes out, and your millions of dollars are on the line. And like Resident Evil, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. So
Yep. And if you got something sensitive, get a shredder.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, or
Don't-
shred it and then put it in the burn bin is what we did.
Yep. So
And so and then the dust clears, and then you got to figure out how you're going to pay for it.
Yep.
which
Production.
would bring us to point 2.
Mm-hmm.
This might be a 6-parter.
Finance and budgeting. You need to know what you're gonna spend. Yeah, and you need to have you don't have to have, I think at the beginning, perfect budget. You don't need to have, everything down to the last cent. But you need to have a rough idea of what everything's gonna cost you, where you're gonna spend your money, and why. And also the medium that you're working in, because it changes who you can hire, what your expectations are. It changes your script, because sometimes it's way cheaper to do something in animation than it is in live action, and vice versa. So, you need to make sure your script works for the medium you're planning for, and that your budget works for the medium that you're planning for.
And where's the money coming from? And
Mhm.
different mediums have different ROIs. So
Yep.
it's really important to know, have a general idea, but also you have to be flexible on different projects. You might, well, if we take this route, we can use this type of financing, and this will be the ROI. But if we take this route, the return on the investment is very different. And depending upon where you're getting the money from, if it's private equity, they might not like going to a streamer, for example. So I mean, there's a lot of limitations, and it's all kind of a catch-22 puzzle that you're trying to put together.
And there's also the possibility that depending on who you get the money from, what demands they may make on the final content.
Yep.
Because there are situations where certain entities have certain political or sociological or religious beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
and because they put in a certain amount of the budget, usually over 50 or 60%, a lot of people feel as though they have a right to manage content. And that's something that happens all, and that can happen. And I'm not even talking about international. That happens here in the States.
Yep.
You know, with certain entities. So it's really tricky. I mean, I just worked on some stuff where we had to like redo a lot of stuff. And with animation, you also have a different production timeline versus let's say an episode of Law and Order, which can be done in about 2 weeks, versus animation, which is 2 to 5 years for a series or a film, sometimes longer. You know, if you're talking about the Spider-Man, like the Spider-Verse films, they take a long time.
Yeah.
And not everybody's willing to sit on their investment that long. So there are considerations about who you approach, how you approach, and what your production and eventually release timeline is going to be, or else some people are going to just walk away. They're going to balk.
You also have to keep in mind, Neal, your comment of ROI made me think of a recent scenario. Certain mediums have different return profiles. And so you need to know what those return profiles are, and don't expect that the people you're talking to, if you like, there's a rep for an investment group that I had met with a while back. And for what we were proposing, how are you going to make your money back? So I said, okay, well, historically, if we do X and Y, other similar things in this genre and niche, here's how they've broken down the return, and here's industry reports and finances from other projects. And they were surprised, like, oh wait, you can get this kind of a sale in this subcategory in merchandising. Yeah, it sells really well with what this. That's why, part of why we're planning to do things the way we're planning to do it. They didn't even know that was a product category. And so doing your homework to know not just how much you need to spend, but how you're going to recoup what you've spent to make it a worthwhile investment also is really, really important. Because who wants to trust you to manage the money? You may make a great product, but if your product does not result in something that will drive people to consume your product, well, if somebody wants to see a wonderful spend and great looking product for its time, Games Workshop decided they were going to make their own animated movie, Ultramarines. They spent millions of dollars. Now, for the time period in which it was made, it looked great. For anybody that suffered through watching it, you know what I'm talking about and why Brandon is chuckling. Just because it looks good. Yeah.
You mean also like the Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within?
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah.
Beautiful movie.
Destroyed, what was it, Sony Animation?
Square Pictures. Never saw
Square
that one
Pictures.
again. Why couldn't they have just adapted a part of, I don't know, any of the video games they had made? Their stories would have worked fine.
Yeah, Final Fantasy VII had already been released at that point, and that was one of the biggest, things on Earth. And I didn't understand why they just ignored Final Fantasy VII. I'm like, everybody knows Cloud and Sephiroth. Like, why did you create all these people that look like Ben Affleck and Sandra Bullock CGI, and instead of just using Cloud and Sephiroth, from which you already had not only a fan base, but character models.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Or go back even further. Look at the story for 6 or 5. They were incredibly popular. 4, go to the moon with the whale. So yeah, your finance and your budgeting plan of how you put that together, how you'll gain a return, you really need to plot all of that out. That has to be a part of the equation. But you also don't want to set it in cement, because as you're going, somebody may suggest something that you never thought of. For example, in our case, I hosted a call a while back with a bunch of people from the Vampire Hunter D Facebook fan group, and asked, what would you want us to make if we made it, like, what do you think we have forgotten that, people would want? The unanimous answer to the merchandising question was a D shower curtain. Had never, ever occurred to me. I do not care what my
pillow. Get a body pillow. What about that one?
My shower curtain is this beige waterproof thing. It is pure functional, no aesthetic. You know what? It never occurred to me. So you do want to be flexible enough to listen to people. As part of, how do we generate our return? What do people want? So get good budget planning. Make sure your financing and your contracts are something you can live with that aren't going to damage your final product, because that will damage your ability to recoup the money or make future things. And at the same time, never believe you have all the answers and that you know it all. Be willing to listen, because if you surround yourself with nodding heads, that's how you stray really, really, really far out of bounds. And someday you find yourself making an Ultramarines movie. Or what was the one that Lucas made, the animated movie? Was it Dark Magic? That was just one of the worst things ever. That's how you have Indiana Jones jumping into a refrigerator to survive a nuclear blast just fine.
What's Dark Magic?
So I think that's the name of it. There are some things I know about this movie. I'm not going to say out publicly here, but let's just say that it was an absolute train wreck. Not just in what finally made the screen, but behind the scenes. And when Disney, I don't know if I'm getting the name right. Forgive me. I'm terrible with names. Just ask my anatomy professor from college. I can still tell you form, function, and structure of the inner ear. I can't tell you what any of it is called. If I'm remembering this correctly, when Disney bought Star Wars, bought Lucasfilm, one of the parts of the contract was that they would distribute an animated movie that George Lucas was making that he wanted to do. And this was a movie that George was all excited about, and his screenings with other animation industry veterans, it did not go well. It went about as well as audience reception to this movie. It was an utter solid lead balloon in how it flew. But to me, that's an example of stories I've heard out of the old Lucasfilm that nobody would correct George Lucas. Nobody would offer another opinion. It was, George, whatever you think is the right answer. And it doesn't matter if you're asking people their opinion if the answer is always whatever you think is best. Always keep in mind, we never know it all. Which, that's an odd tangent we've gotten on finance and budget, but I think that's true in every endeavor.
Thank you for listening to Lefty Speaks, the official Vampire Hunter D podcast, hosted by Brandon Easton, Neal Fischer, and Scott McLean. This podcast is created by Unified Pictures and 9 Realms. Narration by Evallen-Muller. Recording and editing by 9 Realms. Produced by Scott McLean and Ian E. Muller. Based on the works created by Hideyuki Kikuchi. Happy hunting.